Hi, my name is Mark. So as you can see, we're back to another episode of Guitarist Week. Again, if this is your first episode and you don't really know what this is about, basically think about it as like a guitar music industry news segment sort of a thing. But instead of me talking about every single thing that happened last week, I'm just going to talk about things that I thought were interesting, funny, or at least discussion worthy. And as I always mention these sorts of videos because I don't talk about every single thing, if there was something that you thought was particularly interesting or something like it that you would like me to talk about or at least give my input on it, just leave it in the comment section below and I'll either respond to you in the comments or I'll address it in next week's video. And since we're talking about that, there's something I want to talk about actually, which is, for those who don't know, like, I don't know, probably like a month ago or maybe more, a video was released on Reverb.com's channel, which was this like collab between Mark Holcomb from Periphery and Yvette Young from Covet. It was actually a pretty interesting video because not only did they talk about their sort of style of writing and stuff like that, but they also did some other things like they taught each other a riff from their bands and they teased us with a little bit of new material that they've been working on together, which was something that I thought was really cool. And for some reason that video is not up anymore. I'm not sure if the video was necessarily removed, but it's not on their channel anymore. And to be honest, I don't think I would actually found out about it if you guys wouldn't have pointed me to, because I made this sort of dank edit video a couple of weeks ago using their video. Again, you can check it out in the card section right there, but basically it's a video that I thought would be funny to make, but again, I don't necessarily want this to be like a self-promoting sort of a thing. Basically, some of you guys left in the comments saying that the video was down, and I was like, wait, is it? I went to check it out and it was down, so some of you guys suggested that I would re-upload the video, but because there's copyrighted music in there and I don't really own the video, there's a really high possibility that YouTube's copyright system won't really let me upload it, and even if it does, YouTube's algorithm will push my channel down because I'm uploading stuff that isn't monetizable. So I'm sorry I can't exactly upload it, at least right now, but we'll see. I mean, if the video doesn't really come back in the next few weeks, I'll maybe try to do something about it, but hey, there's something you guys can do, which is you can DM Reverb or try to get in contact with them to try and see what's up. I actually DM'd them and left them an email, but they haven't really gotten back to me, so I'm not really sure, but if you guys spam them, you may get an answer back. And since we're talking about some stuff that's a little bit odd, I just want to suggest to you guys this video. It's actually from my favorite YouTube channel, which is Wisecrack. Again, if you don't know them, they basically take pop culture stuff and then try to analyze them in a philosophical or psychological way, and then break it down and try to show us some of the ways you can try to interpret those sorts of things. And they made a video that I was actually very surprised to see, and even Jared, the host of the channel, was very surprised that somebody had the idea to make that video. Basically, they have this series called Deep or Dumb, where they take a subject like a movie or a TV show or something like it, and they go, okay, is it deep or dumb? I think it's pretty self-explanatory, really. But in last week's episode, they actually did Smash Mouth, and because they're a band and they sort of analyze their songwriting and their lyrics, I thought that for us musicians, even though it's kind of dank, it might be interesting to check out. Again, if you don't really know their channels and you're into pop culture stuff, I highly suggest you go check it out. Like I mentioned before, from all the channels I'm subscribed to, whether they're music stuff or just nerd stuff and some of the other things I'm into, Wisecrack is my #1 favorite channel, and even though they don't really need me to advertise them, I mean, they've got like millions of subscribers and I'm just sitting here with my 381 subs, which, don't take me wrong, I highly appreciate that you guys subscribe, and please subscribe if you're watching this video and you're not subscribed. But yeah, you got what I mean. And don't worry, we have a lot more stuff to talk about, but before I get to it, I just want to say, please subscribe to my channel. As you're probably aware, YouTube acts a little bit weird. Even if you subscribe to my channel, those channel's videos may really not show up in the subscription box. And even if you ring the little notification bell thingy below, you still really will not be notified of that channel's content. So if you want to stay tuned to my videos, not only do I suggest subscribing and turning on all the notifications, but also follow me on social media. Not only do I post some exclusive stuff there, like improvise solos and jamming over backing tracks, and generally wherever I'm up to at the moment, but I always post there about my videos. Again, links for the usual subjects will be below, but in general at Guitar. And since you're done there, please consider leaving a like and share this video on social media. I highly appreciate it. But getting back to the video itself, something that I want to talk about is podcasts, because let's be honest, nowadays everybody and their mother has a podcast. If you're a guitar player and you were on Instagram last week, you've probably seen a bunch of posts about John Mayer being on Dean Delray's podcast. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, when I went through those posts, I actually skipped them because I thought, oh, it's just a podcast from a guy talking about John Mayer. Not a guy talking with John Mayer. I mean, who the hell is famous enough to podcast with John Mayer? But then it kept getting suggested to me, and I was like, okay, sure, let's see what this guy's about. And I was actually pretty surprised because the podcast is hosted by Dean Delray, who I quickly became a fan of. Not only does he do podcasts with famous musicians like Duff McKagan, George Lynch, of course, John Mayer, but also Paul Stanley and Corey Taylor. And like I mentioned before, at first I was like, who the hell is this guy? How does he know all these guys? So I did a quick Google search and I found out that he's actually a pretty good singer and I would say semi-famous comedian. And don't take me wrong, I think he's semi-famous because he doesn't really have that many subscribers. So maybe there's also some other people who don't really know about him and it's not just me. But if on the comedy side he's good enough for Dane Cook and Bill Burr, then I'm in. And on the music industry sort of a thing, you'll just need to listen to his John Mayer podcast. And honestly, it's one of those things. When I listened to the first one, I was like, okay, maybe I should give it a try. So I listened to, I think, the Paul Stanley one. Then I just got in and started listening to basically all the other ones I mentioned before. It definitely earned my subscription, and I highly suggest you go check it out. And another podcast I want to suggest to you guys, I haven't exactly listened to it yet, but Jacob Collier was on this podcast called So the Jerker on Songwriting. Again, I haven't really listened to it, but it seems interesting. And again, if it has Jacob, I'll definitely listen to it. And I'll try to check it out and see if he's got any other ones. I'll update you next week. I can't really suggest it was a good thing, but from their teasers on Instagram, it sounded like it would be some pretty interesting stuff. And it's Jacob, so how can it not be interesting? And talking about Jacob Collier again, last week it was like it was the Clash of the Titans or something. Basically there was this photo with the shoes of Jacob Collier, Steve Vai, and Cory Henry. And I was like, damn, if these guys get together too much, there's a really big possibility that the music industry is going to implode. Again, I think you guys will probably be aware of who Steve Vai is. And again, those of you who are into jazz and modern stuff will probably know about Snarky Puppy and Cory Henry's solo, and by that example, you'll probably know Jacob Collier. But again, if you don't really know them, take my word, these three getting together is like the Avengers assembling. And I actually knew that Steve was working with Jacob because he talked about it in the Captain Meets interview, I think, where Captain Lee asked him if he was into any new artists and stuff. It was like, well, yeah, Jacob Collier, and actually one of the guys from Dirty Loops, and we've been working together and stuff like it. I was like, okay, I'm listening. And again, after digging into it a little bit more, I think they were actually with Quincy D. Jones, which again, you should really check out. He's a legend. And Steve Vai actually gave Jacob a guitar lesson, which one I think is really cool because Jacob can get around the guitar, I guess, but he's not really a guitar player. And not only is it cool that he's sharing with everybody that he's getting a guitar lesson from a guy that actually knows how to play guitar, because I see many people nowadays that are either singers or composers and try to play guitar, and then we get some of the performances that end up on CVT's channels. And I'm not really sure already, but I think that in Jacob's post, he talked about getting a lesson about, I think, legato, vibrato, and bending or stuff like that. And again, I think it's really important that he shared that, because many times there are some guitar players who are proficient at the technique part of stuff, but then the vibrato is sort of weird, and then their bending is out of tune. When they try to do either legato or picking, it sounds all mushy and stuff like that. I mean, they're in the right track, but they lack all of that technical stuff that many times is really important. Again, I'm not necessarily saying that you need to be able to bend a note with fourth, or that you need to do Zakk Wylde style vibratos, or that you even need to play at like, I don't know, 320 BPMs, but at least you gotta have some technique, right? But again, that was sort of a tangent, I don't really need to get into that right now. But basically, Steve Vai, Cory Henry, and Jacob Collier, if that's not the Clash of the Titans, nor the Avengers Assemble of the music industry right now, I don't know what it is. Maybe if you could add Dirty Loops into the equation, or make Be Snarky Puppy, but at least, I don't know, that's too crazy for me. If these three is the Avengers assembling, getting all those guys together would be the equivalent of Avengers Endgame, and I don't really think I'm emotionally ready for that. And before we get to gear-related stuff, I just want to mention this cover of Andy Timmons' Electric Gypsy that features, again, sorry if my pronunciation isn't correct, it features Lisa X, Yo-Yo, Danny Capelli, and I think a Bim Finger. Not only did they play the song, but they actually played the song in the version that was played on Martin Miller's channel, and I actually really like that version because I think there's a really good mix between improvising and sticking to the main themes of the song. But not only did they do a perfect job covering those guys' solos, but even their soloing, again, I'm not really sure if they were improvising, maybe not, maybe it was all composed. But again, it's these sorts of videos that take me out of that boomer mentality, and that make me like, okay, maybe the younger generation can actually play the guitar and not just play cowboy chords. Again, go check it out, they were really great. And I don't mean great for kids, I mean great in general. And like I mentioned before, here we are getting into Gibson again. Let's be honest, if you think they're going to get out of these news shows anytime soon, I think that you're very much mistaken, kind sir. Even though this wasn't the order they came out, I first want to talk about this interview that was on, I think, Ultimate Guitar, where they got JC to talk about that Gibson play authentic controversy and stuff like that. And again, I'm shortening a lot of what he said, but you can go check that news out by yourself. But basically it was like, well, yeah, we've made some mistakes, but come on, we're trying to restructure Gibson and it's only been like, what, 8 months? So come on, you gotta give us a chance. In a way, we're just starting out. And then when they asked him about Gibson going after the smaller brands and stuff like that. He was basically like, well, it's not like we're going after smaller brands, we're just trying to make the world see that these are Gibson designs, and that if you're going to copy a Gibson, we're going to get in your way. There's a lot of counterfeit stuff, and we don't really want that to tarnish our name, I guess. And on one hand, I'm like, yeah, I guess it makes sense that you don't really want brands using your name and using your designs to make fake and low quality stuff. I get it. But what about Dean and Famous? They weren't really copying your designs. They had guitars that were inspired by your designs. Like I mentioned in some other videos, it's not like somebody who wants a Gibson Flying V is going to buy a Famous just because. If they buy a Famous Flying V instead of a Gibson Flying V, it's probably because Famous offers some things that Gibson doesn't. Like, let's say that you wanted a Flying V with a Floyd Rose. Famous can do you that. It's not like Gibson can't, but Gibson doesn't have that model on catalog, and if you actually order up a custom shop, I think a Gibson custom would be way more expensive than a Famous custom. And it's not like the Famous V is completely like the Gibson V, so yeah, that's probably why Famous is selling V-like guitars, is because they made V-like guitars like you don't do. And even with that sort of a thing, when they go like, well, yeah, but we're working on our quality control and the lights on our factory and stuff like that, well, I'm not really saying that you're not, but there are still faulty guitars leaving the factory. Again, you just need to watch some of Agafish's videos on YouTube, or if you can, even go try some Gibsons on display, because I've actually tried some of them, and I even own a Les Paul Standard from 2009, back there. Which, even though we can argue if the problems that are on that guitar are still on the guitars that have been made more recently, but the reality here is simply that you're not really doing your job correctly, and instead of going like, well, we're trying to do our best or whatever, just go like, okay, we fucked up and we're just going to try and make new guitars. Forget about everything else, just try to make good guitars. And that brings us around to another video they did where they basically gave a couple of guitars to veterans, some actually limited edition custom shop guitars, and they were like, okay, and we're going to donate some money and some other instruments and stuff like that. And I get it that they tried to make it like a wholesome video and stuff like that, but let's be honest, if you're going to donate guitars for veterans and kids and stuff like that, it's not like I'm against if you're donating custom shop guitars. But weren't there like a couple of guitars that weren't being used and could be like modified to donate to people who can't really access guitars, something like it? Nah, I think I'm probably mistaken. It was probably a PRS. But again, I've been probably rambling, so let's get to some other stuff. Something I actually want to talk about, which I didn't really mention in last week's video because I thought, meh, I mean, I can see it happening, was that last week Dave Mustain made a Reverb shop where he basically sold a lot of his guitars and other pieces of gear that he was either not using or wanted to get rid of, and we actually got to know that there was this one guy who bought like almost all the guitars. I saw some people being salty like, oh, I didn't really get a chance to buy it and stuff like that. Oh really? No shit. Like, if you're not fast to buy it, you're probably not going to get it. But something that I thought was interesting was that some people were rumoring that Dave was leaving Dean for Gibson, and that Gibson was like working with Dave on this modern Flying V design. And I'm not really saying that I couldn't see that happen. Like, on one hand, I think Dave has been with BC Ridge, then Jackson, then ESP, then Dean, and I wouldn't be surprised if he moved brands again, but I would be definitely surprised if he moved to Gibson, because Dave is a modern guy and Dave likes stuff made his own way, and I don't think Gibson are the type of brand to do that. But again, I can't really judge, and I'm not Dave and I'm not Gibson, so if they're actually working on something, I would at least like to see it. But again, enough with Gibson. I've been rambling for like, I don't know, 20 minutes or something. So yeah, at least for now, just leave your thoughts on the comment section below. I'd really like to see if you guys agree with something that I said or disagree or something like it. And I think we can finally get to gear. Again, I know this isn't the bass show, but I better talk about it now before I get the other stuff. Because I'm a bass player, I can't really not talk about this sort of a thing. Other than the Cutlass, I'm not really that much of a fan of Music Man basses. They kind of look odd and funky to me. But like that other fretless one that sort of looked like Jacko's bass that they released on the Ball Family Reserve a couple of months ago, this one looks awesome with the spotted maple and the black hardware, double humbucking pickups, and the ebony fretboard. It just looks sick. And again, for those who follow this series, I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, something like it, we talked about this weird model that Greg Koch played in some of the Wildwood Guitars videos, which was the Rob Thorne California Special, which was this guitar that I first was like, okay, I could see Fender doing something like this. But then I started looking at it and I was like, I'm not really sure if I like it or not. On one hand, it looks like this modern Strat-ish thing, kind of offset, but then it has some weird cavity covers and pickguards that I was like, it almost looks good, but then it kind of messes me up. And now there's a video on the Music Zoo channel where you get the actual Rob Thorne, which if you don't know, he's the master luthier at the Fender Custom Shop, and he kind of breaks down the guitar and whatever. And I was actually like, okay, it's actually interesting that Fender is releasing a new design and getting this one builder to design its own guitar. and not being like a collaborative thing, like a bunch of guys in an office saying, okay, we gotta do this or we gotta do that so it won't sell or whatever. Again, it's still a custom shop guitar, so again, it's only going to be made by order, and it's still a pretty expensive guitar, but I thought it was interesting that Fender was up to that sort of a thing. Again, now that we know a little bit more about this guitar, if there's anything you guys feel about that guitar, leave it in the comment section below. And lastly but not leastly, on this gear journey, we're talking about Aristides, because they actually released this teaser of this T-type guitar, and I don't know about you guys, but from the image, it actually looks pretty cool. Again, it's only a teaser, and it's like the CGI design, but it definitely looks interesting. I can't really tell on that one image if it's going to get those cavities that I really don't like on Aristides guitars. And because I'm a Tele guy, I'm actually quite interested to see where this is going to end up with. But yeah, I guess that's it. Again, there were probably some other things that happened in the guitar industry and music industry, but these were the ones I wanted to talk about, because I can't really talk about everything. Again, if there's something you guys want me to talk about, just leave in the comment section below. Like I mentioned before, I'll either respond to you in the comments, or I'll address it in next week's video. Again, thank you so very much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, turn on all the notifications, follow me on social media, and share this video on social media. I'd highly appreciate it. Other than these Guitarist Week videos, I actually do some other videos, normally guitar lessons, where I talk about soloing and improvising and playing out of the box and stuff like that. And I also do composing and songwriting videos. Again, not only sharing tips and tricks and showing you guys how to apply music theory and chords and stuff like that and building melodies, but I'm also doing this series where I compose a song and show you guys my process. And if you actually have any suggestions for videos, I have this dedicated series called Yate, You Ask I Teach. I know, pretty boring, generic, and self-explanatory title, but as you can probably guess, and as the name implies, in that series I pretty much teach anything you guys have in the comment section below, that is guitar or music related, of course. So if there's something you want me to talk about, just leave it in the comment section below with the hashtag Yate. Again, the ones I mentioned are going to be in the card section right there, or on the annotations of the end screen, which will be on just a couple of seconds, so please stay tuned, because I've been rambling till now, and I don't want to bore the few of you who've been staying this far. Cheers!